Welcome to the Sharing Grace podcast, a ministry of Church at Viera on the Space Coast of Florida. Our desire is to share grace with everyone and see Christ change lives. We hope that this podcast helps you embrace the grace of God and empowers you to share it with everyone. Let's jump into today's conversation.
Well, thanks for joining us for the Sharing Grace podcast today. Joining me today is Pastor Jay Austin. Thank you so much for being here. We missed you last week, man.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, good to have you. And Wendell, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for sharing such a powerful message on Sunday. If you missed it, you need to go back and watch it. Jay, I know you were on vacation. I hope you got a chance to watch it.
I watched it twice.
Twice?
Yeah, I watched it real time and then went back and watched it again on
That's
the way
good.
on the
That's
drive
good.
back. Oh, I listened to it on the way back.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of great feedback from your message, Wendell, so thanks for being such a willing servant to get up there and share, man. You always bring it. Always bring it. So the specific text that you unpacked for us was in our series. It's personal, and it was on John chapter 7. And your key thought from the message was, trust his timing in all things. Mm-hmm. Trust his timing in all things. Man, that is a hard thing for us to do, isn't it? It's extremely difficult. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And let's start with kind of a personal question. We've all had moments where life didn't unfold the way we expected, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you can say, yep, that's me. That tension between too soon and too late can really stretch our trust in God. Have you guys ever felt like God was moving too slow or too fast in your lives in a moment that really mattered deeply to you? Have you ever had that experience?
You want me to go first?
Go for it.
You go, Win.
I mean, I believe that pretty much every person has had that, but I had that with my marriage. I don't even know if I shared that last time, but I knew things were going south in my marriage, and as hard as I tried to fix things, it only made it worse.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like God was moving too slow. And I don't know if he brought us to the point to where he said, okay, now you're actually ready for me to step in instead of trying to do things on your own. And so once God actually stepped in, it moved really fast. I mean, what had been torn down over 7 years in a matter of 3 months was pretty much reconciled, and then the healing had begun.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, just in response to what you just said, what I've discovered is that the path of God is not as far away from you as you think. Mm-hmm. And so staying consistent, staying faithful, and then moving back when he brings you. A lot of times I feel like there's all this distance I have to travel, but he's right there the whole time. It's just right there.
That's a good statement, Jay.
There. Yeah, for us,
you,
we just went through this thing where we're moving here a year ago, and we were having our house in Franklin. Our boys were living there. And so then we are looking for a house. Everything's sold in Franklin. Everything was good. And so we put a contract on a house here in Brevard County. Contract was ready to go. We had met all of the seller's demands, and I don't say that lightly. Mm-hmm. And we sent it to him, and he goes, no, I've decided not to sell it. Like, just out of the blue. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how to handle this situation, but we'll just trust. And so we started looking around for other houses, and a couple of days passed, and I just went back to my realtor, and I said, hey, check and just see if he's not ready to sell now. And so she just sent a note over to the realtor, and they signed the contract. And it's one of those things. It's like we're now moving into the house that we felt like God had for us. There were some things that needed to line up. The results are that it's actually better for us than it was before. And so, you know what? I'm just learning to be patient the older I get. Mm-hmm.
It's funny, if you're listening to the podcast, wherever you're at, we share the questions with each other ahead of time, and we all kind of take notes or mental notes. And it's funny, my answer aligned with yours today. I've found that selling homes in times of transition to be some of the most stressful in marriages, or stressful for anybody.
Definitely. I'm sorry, honey. I'm trying to do better.
Yeah, right. And that's exactly where I felt like God has moved too slow in my life. Mm-hmm. Like, God, I thought I was listening to you, and I heard you correctly, and you want me to move here, or you want me to move there. And for that to work, I've got to sell my house. God, did I hear you correctly? Why is this not happening? And what I found in the multiple times that we've transitioned and sold homes, he's always proven himself to be faithful, even in those very tense, difficult seasons of moving and selling homes. So that's good. Well, thanks, guys, for being a little bit personal there. Let's dive into the passage a little bit. John chapter 7, Jesus told his brothers, my time is not yet here, but your time is always here, or your time is always opportune. That's such a powerful line from John chapter 7. As we reflect on the difference between divine timing and human urgency, what do you think Jesus meant? How does that speak to the pace that we often feel the pressure to keep in our day-to-day lives?
Well, just to piggyback a little bit off of Pastor Jay's story, you know, they're moving in a time of transition, and they meet the seller's demands, and then for some reason, at the last second, his heart is hardened and says no. Mm-hmm. But then Pastor Jay has the wisdom, hey, just check back. And then things turn out better. So you have the real life demands and things that we know we need to take care of and get done. And yet God isn't necessarily pressured by our real life time and demands, but yet he's on his timing, and then things come through. So it's just this weird, I don't even want to call it a double dutch, but there is this tension between the divine and the human and how these things come to be.
It's hard to explain sometimes.
I became fascinated by the passage and always looking at what's going on as a part of it. And it's the festival of the booths, or the Sukkot. It's the time, it's that season that Israel stops and reflects on the 40 years in the wilderness. It's the time that they reflect on the last harvest, the final harvest of the year. And then they reflect on the coming of a Messiah. And so when I think about this passage, there's something really deep there of why Jesus is doing it at this moment. And he's walking into it and going, he's fulfilling all of those things of why they're celebrating this particular festival at that moment, as he is the provision from God through this long, long season of not seeing God's work. He is the harvest. He is the final harvest. He is it, right? He is the final harvest. And then finally, he is the Messiah they've been looking for. But he says, not yet the time. Like, this isn't the time that the harvest will be reaped, right? So just interesting.
That's good.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, and I focused in on this word urgency, do you feel like living in America, don't you feel like there's a sense of urgency about everything? Like I don't think that's experienced in other parts of the world. There's a little bit of a slower pace in other parts of the world that you've traveled the world, man.
Yes.
And there's just a different pace of life in other areas, but everything is urgent in America, right? In the matter of 10 minutes, I can get a Starbucks coffee in my hand because that's urgent, man. I need it. I can go to Chick-fil-A and in a matter of 10 minutes get a number one Chick-fil-A sandwich, waffle fries, and an Arnold Palmer in 10 minutes. That's urgent, man. I can drop into Target and get whatever I need. Like, there's this sense of urgency about everything, and it's easily accessible. But I found that's not the case in spiritual matters sometimes, right? It's not. God's got to do and we're going to talk about this in a minute. Like, yes, we may feel an urgency for God to move in our lives, but we've got to trust his timing, and we've got to, and I feel and I think just what I'm saying is I think our perspective is warped in the culture that we live in just because of the sense of accessibility that we have to the demands that we feel like we have. Any thoughts on that?
I'll take it. So I believe the urgency that we feel, right, I believe it's possibly distorted, maybe perverse from our fallen nature. But in America especially, I've noticed, if church starts at 11, right? You be there at 11, or you be there earlier if you want to have seats. Your job, right? Punctual. Yes, you should be. But there's so many things that we're so structured, and we move from one thing to the next thing, and we don't leave time for God or anything else in between. And I've noticed when I've traveled abroad, especially in Africa, Peru, things like that, it seems like, okay, church is going to start at this time. But does it really? And, when you do missions in Africa, they say no 2 days are the same, because we have things planned. And the next thing you know, while we're on our way to what we're going to, we're going over here instead. And so it just seems like when we're here, our lives are so structured. We're being pushed and shoveled right from one thing to the next, and we miss what God's doing in the in-between.
100%. Yep.
And there's not time for things just to work through. And one of the things I found with technology, like there's an impatient of everyone in my house to get something fixed. Like when there's a technology issue, fix it. Well, it's not working anymore. Throw it away, get a new one. It's that process.
Yeah.
But when you take the time to understand it, process it, let it work itself out, it tends to, like, there's this moment of, wow, that just fixed itself almost.
Yeah.
But it took an awful long time.
The Wi-Fi reset.
Right.
You know,
Something happened
worked
because you were patient enough to wait on it to happen.
Yeah.
And I see the parallel with that with God. When I'm patient with God and let him do all the work he's doing and not try to shortcut the work in between, even with my relationship with my wife, there are times that there's tension in our relationship, and I have to let the tension live and be okay with it, so that when we come out the other side, we've let God do his work in it rather than us trying to fix it or just ignore it or be passive aggressive.
You know, and to that point right there, this might be a bit embarrassing, especially for those who are pretty handy. I'm not a handy guy, right? I did athletics and things like that. You know, I maybe walk the dogs, you know, tended to the dogs, the trash. But just recently, our dryer began to leak water. And so we thought, wait, what's going on? We thought it was the ventilation system. My father-in-law even worked on it. Things were kind of moist in there as well. So we thought, yes, for sure, that's it. And then so I had it unplugged. And then the thing continued to leak water. And I thought, what's going on? And so I looked at it. I was like, this is a dryer. All the dryers I had growing up never was really connected to the water. You know, but we have a steam function on
Yeah,
it.
I was going to say.
Right? And so I'm thinking to myself, everything's unplugged. All of a sudden, water continues to leak out. I said, you know what? I bet you if I cut it off at the source, the water reconnected, there's no more water coming out. So our dryer sat there for a few days. And I said, you know what? I think it's right. Let's unplug the water. Let's move it, this and that. So we don't use the steam option no more.
Yeah.
But it was just simply that.
Yeah.
You know, just the logic was there. Disconnect the water.
Yeah.
And no more water comes out.
Take the time to let it make sense.
Yeah.
Good. You solved it, man. You're handier than you thought. I'm a frequent flyer on YouTube. There's very few things I can't fix with YouTube, right?
If you're having trouble with your washer, now's your opportunity to call the handyman.
Yep, that's right.
Wendell.
Mama's a dryer, not a washer.
Dryer.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about urgency and that uncomfortableness of waiting. You guys have both touched on that. And why do you think we often feel pressure to make things happen instead of waiting on God's leading? Why do you think we feel that pressure?
I think because when we need a move of God, usually that need or that urgency, that pressure is probably sparked by some sort of pain or anxiety of this deadline or something to happen. You know, you kind of think about, you just look at Abraham and Sarah, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have a son. Oh, he's taking too long. Maybe he meant this. No, he didn't say that.
Yeah.
So we tend to try to make things happen in our own power because there is this anxiety in the waiting. There is this sometimes pain in the waiting. And we want nothing more to not be in pain or to not have anxiety, that sort of underlying stress that just flows through you day by day, minute by minute, second by second.
That's good.
Yeah, the way God has made us is first we have to have food, then we need to have shelter, and then we need to have our basic needs met so we can survive. And once we have those in place, the very next thing that he's made us to do is have a sense that we need to be in control of something. Like we just need to be in control. And we feel that sense of being out of control, then we want to take over the lordship of our life from him to take control and make things, whether it's even the right decision, we just make a decision so that we can feel in control. And that's what I've learned is that he gave us that control to push us toward him, like that basic need that we have to be in control, to say, I recognize I'm not in control. God, you're going to be in control, and so I have to really be faithful to let that play out.
That's good, Jay. I loved your thought that in the waiting, God is doing some of his most important work in our life, right? I don't know if you've heard this statement. It was kind of preached into me in my early ministry days. He said, Brandon, there are people who make things happen. There are people who watch things happen. And then there's people who are left wondering what just happened. What just happened? And he said, which category do you want to be in? And I said, well, of course I want to be in the category of people who make things happen. And I think that's true of most of us, right? I think that's true of all of us. But when it comes to spiritual matters, right, we still want to be in that category. We want to make things happen. And I think to some degree, there's some truth to that when it comes to spiritual matters. But ultimately, we want to be under God's lordship and his leading in our lives. And have you all heard that phrase, God doesn't move a parked car? You guys heard that one?
I have not heard that.
You haven't heard that one?
It's easier
I
than
have
me.
now.
Serious?
Yeah.
That's like famous.
You can use
The,
that.
the idea is you got to be moving, because if you're not moving, God ain't going to direct you.
Gotcha.
And I don't know how true it is. Maybe theologically it's not 100% true, but I at least for me, I like to get in the car and know where I'm going first. And for Abraham's sake, remember he said, listen, I'm going to bless you. I need you to go and move. Get moving. I need you to go, just get moving. And Abraham found that in moving, God proved himself faithful and continued to direct him. So, yeah, waiting's not easy, man. Waiting is definitely not easy. Well, this may bring us to something a little bit deeper. God's timing isn't just strategic, it's sovereign, which you highlighted. And you love, I love it that you love the attribute of sovereignty of God. He sees what we can't. So what does God's perfect timing teach us about his sovereignty, Wendell? And how does trusting that change the way we face delays and disappointments in our life?
What does God's perfect timing teach us about his sovereignty? Well, for one, I believe it adequately and accurately places us in the right position of that we are man, formed of the dust, and that he is God enthroned in heaven. First, I believe it does teach us that, because no matter how much we push and pull or kick and scream, God is a parent of such that he will not capitulate to his children's cries or screams and kicks. And then what was the second part of that question?
How does trusting that change the way we face delays and disappointments in our life? Do we have a different perspective when God's not moving in the timing that we expect him to?
Yes.
How does trusting his sovereignty change that perspective?
I believe in trusting his sovereignty. What that does is it becomes a type of pacifier, if you will, because you know that whatever you're going through, why it hurts or why you're in pain, it is a bit of a comfort for you, sort of like a blankie for a kid, or a weighted blanket for someone who has anxiety. It essentially shrouds you, it essentially covers you, and it allows you to say, not my will, but your will be done.
That's good. What do you think, Jay?
I'm just imagining a person driving in their car right now, listening to this conversation about God's sovereignty and timing, and they're probably on the way somewhere. They're probably rushing, either to pick up kids or get to work. I think the things that are coming to my mind just in Scripture, we are to take action on the things that God has given us to do today.
Amen.
Having clarity with that and not being passive is very important. But the working out of all things are in God's timing, and so we can trust that, and trust that even within the chaos and the crisis, if we just lean not to our understanding, as you said, but into the will of God,
That's good.
then we can walk through very difficult times, uncertainty, knowing that things are going to work out for God's glory and God's good. But we do have to take action on the things that we've been given
100%.
to do today.
That's right.
In that, don't take on somebody else's responsibility.
Yeah.
And don't take on things that are wasting our time, or someone is going to, we're doing it for the approval of somebody else.
Yeah, that's good.
You kind of alluded to it, if I can just briefly. So even in that, in the clarity of it, God's timing, I want to be clear that I'm not necessarily speaking of, okay, when we are disobedient and we are sinful and we suffer from that, yes, God is sovereign over that, but there is an accountability that must be taken on our part to understand, like, okay, I'm suffering this because of my disobedience. But when you're walking in obedience to God and then something comes upon you, then that is another part of God's sovereignty that we can look to him and what is he teaching us in those moments. So those both are great learning mechanisms for the believer, but almost a flip side of the coin. Do you get what I'm saying with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about obedience for just a moment. You both alluded to it. In John 7:17, Jesus connects understanding with a willingness to do God's will. It's interesting that Jesus doesn't say the key to understanding is study or intellect, but a heart that wants to do God's will. Have you ever seen that play out in your own personal journey in life? This idea that God really ultimately wants your obedience, not necessarily your intellect?
Yes, it plays out more in my life now that I'm a parent.
Okay.
And what I've learned about God is by and large, declarative God. He will declare a thing. He doesn't necessarily always explain a thing. And the thing is, when he declares a thing or you are told to do, sometimes your children will ask you why. I'm not here necessarily to explain why I've told you to do, so you do. And a lot of times when we do, then we understand why.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
yes, I've had that play out in my life.
100%. I love that thought, that idea that obedience then results in knowing, not the other way around. And you see multiple stories of that throughout Scripture. What about you, Jay?
Well, I'm going to go back to your YouTube analogy. I have done many car repairs on my car, and I've watched the YouTube, and it's been in my mind. And I even know the value. Okay, this part is supposed to work with this part for this outcome. So I know the value of it. It's moved not only from knowledge to wisdom of going, oh, that makes sense. But until I put my hand onto a wrench or until I put the screw and start untwisting it, do I understand at all what I'm doing?
Yes.
And so then I have to go back and watch the video again, because now I have touched it, I've used it, and I'm going, oh, that's what they meant. Let me understand it a little more. I just went through this with a new remote on my garage door. I tried 17 times to make that remote work, but finally when I got the remote in my hand and I began to handle it, did I start to understand where the knowledge and the wisdom actually applied.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
I don't want this to be TMI. It's just funny because this is,
There you go. This is why you got to listen to the
with the
podcast.
medical thing, right? So I've heard Paul say, he said, I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews, tribe of Benjamin, circumcised on the 8th day.
Yeah.
I said, my son was born. I talked to his doctor, pediatrician. I said, I'm going to get him circumcised on the 8th day.
Okay.
So it happened, right? And I was there for the whole thing. By the way, it took a sugar stick to, just confuse him to where he didn't know what was going on. I thought, wow, that's distraction, just sugar. But when I researched it, the vitamin K levels, which help blood clot and heal, is the highest on the 8th day.
No kidding.
But God said do it back then. But he didn't tell you, your vitamin K levels will be high and, to heal faster and the blood clot. He didn't say that.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's a good thought.
I
didn't
continually
know that.
find out that God's smarter than me.
He's way smarter than all of us.
Day
Come
after
on.
day.
Oh, doggone it. Yeah, that's so good. I learned something new. This is another reason why you got to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I had to
You might
listen all the way through Sugar Stick
Where's
to
he
get to the point.
Where's he going with this? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
There's so much you can unpack there. How easily we can be distracted
So good.
There you go.
with just sugar.
There's a sermon in there somewhere.
And what can happen if
least
you
an
do get
illustration.
distracted.
At least an illustration.
I've never eaten a sugar stick again.
I'm surprised when Abraham came back to his household and said, this is what God said. You just gave them all a sugar stick?
Yeah, how'd that happen? Oh, boy. All right, too much. That's another podcast for another day. In this short little statement, Jesus basically calls them out for knowing the truth but not embodying the truth. Why do you think there's such a gap between knowledge and obedience today, even for those who really, truly love God? Why is there such a gap there?
What do you mean when you say a gap between knowledge and obedience? You mean how much they know, as in quite a bit, as versus to what they do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was Chandler that said the problem with Christians today is, and we may have to edit this and put it back in, we are educated way beyond our level of obedience.
And that's what I was kind of thinking right now, because sometimes with a certain knowledge, there's a knowledge that puffs up, and it's almost as if we'd rather, if God left us a manual how to clean the house, so to speak, and what to do, and then he left for a while and we came back and we said, hey, this manual was so great. It was so good. I love how you said this about the toilet and the bathroom and the tub. But then he comes in and it's not clean.
Yeah.
You think, well, what did I give it to you for? And I think a lot of times we tend to go to Bible studies and we'll study the scriptures and we'll do these things, but we don't actually live out our faith.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there is a sense to feed the sheep. You have to open up the pen door and take them out.
That's a great point.
So there's a doing in it.
Yeah.
We have in our nature a brokenness.
Yeah.
We desire after things that are not best for us. God was very clear in his scripture, hey, the reason I'm writing this to you is because ultimately this is the best for you. It's the way you should be in a relationship with each other. It's the way you should be in a relationship with me.
Yep.
This is really the best for you. But we don't always want what's best for us. We want the desire of our hearts. And I'm just thinking of different times in my life when I have chosen not to go with the knowledge that's in my head because I wanted something. I wanted to feel a certain way. I wanted to be in control. I wanted some kind of euphoric experience. And so I just chose to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
And so it's discipline. Obedience is a discipline.
Yes,
it's a personal discipline.
It sure is.
Yeah.
We look into the perfect law of obedience, that mirror, and then we leave and forget our own reflection.
The really cool thing about obedience, and I've done some study in the book of Matthew about like what does it mean to obey Jesus, because that's one of the commands that he said, to go and obey me. And there's 49 different things that he said, these are the things I want you to teach to obey. And they're really simple things, but they're hard to do, like love one another, to turn, just really simple things, but things that we don't do.
Yeah.
And it's not about us being saved by that obedience. It's about the best that God's got for us.
Right.
And see, that obedience is actually, it is equivalent with faith. As you are obedient, that's your faith, because now you're trusting what he's saying, so you're doing it. And without faith, it's impossible to please God.
That's good.
That's great. Well, let's wrap up today with something a little bit practical. Is there something in your life right now that you're being asked to wait on, to maybe trust God deeper, or to step out in obedience? And we'll just end it there. What is there something that you're wrestling with?
There is. I won't go into it in detail at all. I met with Pastor Mark recently because I wanted to get counsel based on what I was thinking about doing and performing. And after speaking with him, it settled my heart in a sense that I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to stay the course. This is what God has said. This is what I will do, and I will wait.
Yeah, that's good. Before you jump in, I love what you said right there. You're faced with maybe a difficult decision, or maybe something's on your heart, and you put it through you brought it to somebody else to get their wisdom and advice. And that's good wisdom for all of us, right? When you think you're hearing from God or reading something in Scripture and it's really touching a spot, man, it's really important to be surrounded with men in your life that you can just bounce ideas off of.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Thank
Jay,
you
what
for
about
that.
you, man?
Yeah, real personal. So the last week, God and I have been talking about something that's popped up in my life that hasn't been there very much, and I've had anger 2 or 3 times in the last couple of weeks. Like I've felt it, and I normally just don't have that emotion. And it really is because there are some things in my life that I feel out of control of, and I'm wanting God to like fix a couple of things, and it all has to do with moving and getting our house restabilized. And I've seen it in the way that I speak to my wife and other people. I just have that edge, and so I think that's the area of obedience that said, "Be patient, be kind, be gentle, long suffering." I need to exhibit those spirits, but I've got to talk to, like you just said, I have to talk to somebody about it, and so that's why I want to be vulnerable enough to even say, you guys that are listening, you have those things that pop up. When they do, take notice of them, because that's a sign to us that we may be out of alignment with God.
That's real good. Real good. Anything else on this topic of sovereignty and trusting and obeying, Wendell, that you'd like to challenge the audience that's listening today?
Off the top, I really can't think of anything at all. All I will say is this. In my learning to love the doctrine of sovereignty, God's sovereignty, there is a submission that comes to it. And we may have to wrestle with our own flesh and pin it down in order to submit to God's will. But even in that, ask for the Spirit of God to help you do so.
That's so good. Yep. And that's not just a one moment wrestling.
Yes.
That flesh.
Depending on what it is, it can be hour by hour.
Yep. That flesh pops up all the time. So, yeah. Well, Jay, will you pray us out today?
Yeah, actually,
Go
there's
ahead.
Did you have something else?
No.
There's a Petra song years ago. Some of you are going, I have no idea who Petra is. Well, it was this Christian band years ago.
Great band.
And there's this lyric that just came to my mind. So this is my prayer for us as we go out. So be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the full armor of God and fight the good fight. He knows all our weakness, and he becomes so strong. He gives us the power and the strength to carry on. More power to you.
That's good.
Amen.
God bless you guys.
Nice. Will you pray us out, or was that it?
That's it, brother.
All
That's
right,
my
man.
prayer over folks.
Well, thanks again for listening today. And listen, take a moment to like and subscribe to this podcast. That helps us get the word out about this resource. And we're just so grateful for y'all listening in, and grateful for the great the feedback. So we'll catch you all next time.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Wendell.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Sharing Grace podcast. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email to sharinggrace@churchatviera.com. If you don't have a church home, we would love to invite you to one of our 3 Sunday services at 8:30, 10, and 11:30 a.m. You can learn more about Church at Viera by visiting churchatviera.com. If this podcast was helpful to you in any way, please subscribe, write a review, or share it with a friend. This will tremendously help us get the word out about this resource. We look forward to catching up with you next time on the Sharing Grace podcast.